Hello friends, my name is Eric and I'm the developer of Virtuous Heaven, which is a game about infinite dogs, radical friends and the end of history. I also have a cold, so my apologies for the slightly raspy voice, and I hope I don't have to cough like a lot of the time. We'll have to see how it goes. It's actually November 30th when I'm going to record and upload this video, but yeah, this is the update for like the last month. Basically the devlog for December. Kind of, it's a weird time thing. Anyway, decided to record it today because I have no idea if I'll be able to record anything in the next few days, because who knows how this cold is going to go. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the last month. And friends, it sure was a month. So, this is what was planned last month. Write a whole bunch of dialogue. So, to frame everything a bit more, I wanted to submit Virtuous Heaven to the IGF, which is short for Independent Games Festival. Not really because I think that it has a chance of winning anything there, but more like to use the deadline to force myself to make permanent decisions about the game's direction, because that was like a constant struggle throughout the year. It's not that the game was completely directionless, but I was like meandering a lot. But anyway, so like the plan was to finish basically everything that I had planned out, like before November 16th, and submit the game to the IGF. So, and that was like write a whole bunch of dialogue to like do narrative framing and all that kind of stuff, build a boss for the first like larger area of the game, rebuild the home area of the game, build an overworld because I wanted to do overworld exploration and kind of like gate progression through overworld progression and all that kind of stuff. Progression through overworld exploration. Kind of like doing something like Zelda 2, which I like as an idea I like really liked. And then put everything together, and as always, hopefully not fall into despair in the face of the sheer impossibility of everything. That was the plan. I started preparing all the overworld stuff. I like wrote out like a bunch of like stuff like where you had like basically where someone was giving you direction on like where to go on the overworld and what to do in order to like basically gain access to further areas. And then it's really funny. I think I recorded the video on like October 31st or like November 1st, around that time, and then did the preparation, and then the day came where it's like, okay, now I have to start like working on the overworld. Let's do an overworld sprite, which I did basically where like with a tiny version of the character that you're controlling and walking around. Had some fun with that. Was looking at like RPG maps to get a sense of like what I want everything to look like. Like started to build out that. And then I think it was like on a Friday, like the Friday of that week, I went on a fairly long walk, and just checking the date here. Yeah, it must have been Friday the 4th of November. Went on a fairly long walk in the afternoon, and about on the halfway mark, and let's talk a little bit about what I've actually done. And this is like the important part here. About the halfway mark, I suddenly asked myself, what if I just don't do an overworld? What if I just build a Metroidvania, like, you know, like a connected map that you explore? Why don't I just do that? Why don't I just make things simpler for me? Because I'm just like spinning my wheels in the ground, and it's very frustrating. And now I'm here just spent the last few days building out new systems for something completely different, and the game never really started moving towards anything, it felt. And there were also like overall problems. Like one large problem for me is always, how do I frame like progression and other stuffs, like narratively? How do I embed this stuff in the world that it makes sense? I don't like basically just like, yeah, I don't like having things that are not attached to like some larger thematic thing or whatever. So I always had problems with that. And there's overall like exploration stuff. Like I had some very cool ideas, and they probably would have been really cool, and also very complicated to pull off and like very time intensive. And so on my way back home, I started to think, okay, if I were to do that, if I were to like change the structure again and basically go back to a structure that I had or that I was thinking about back in like around June or May, but in a slightly different way. How could I do that? And then I got back home, and one thing that I did is I just took, because one thing that I did over most of the summer was build different test levels and concept levels, just for me to try out different ideas on how to gate progression and like build out spaces that you can traverse and like get a feel about what I want the moment to moment like stuff that you're doing, what I want it to feel like, and all that kind of stuff. And I pulled all of these sometimes fairly large maps together into one large thing and just rearranged them and looked at like all the stuff that I did. Like it's not that I did nothing over this year. It was just like a very I compare it to like, okay, you have a goal that you want to get to. And obviously the shortest way to get there, and the goal here is make this game. And or maybe a step further, like before that, have a good idea about like what you want, like how people get from start to finish in this game. As I said, structure. Build that, have an idea, and like build everything out for that. And the shortest way obviously is a straight line, where like you never deviate and just build the thing that you immediately said that you were going to build. But like what I did mostly over this year was kind of like doing a lot of curves. It's not that I never, like, I was always getting closer to some kind of final structure. There were always, like in each attempt, there were always like certain things where I realized, okay, I want this to feel like that, and I want this system to work like this, and I mostly didn't touch them anymore, and all that kind of stuff. So there was some progress, but it was like very, very slow. So yeah, so that was like where I sat down and then wrote down, okay, what else do I need to change if I were to do this? If I were to say, okay, it's an interconnected map, and you like gradually reveal more of it and explore more of it, how do I frame this exploration? How do I gate progression? And that's the other interesting part. As I said, the previous idea was very much based on Zelda 2. This idea now is kind of similar, but not exactly like it. Is more similar to like another not very well liked sequel of another fairly famous Nintendo franchise, which is Metroid 2, which I personally really, really like as an idea of like where you explore larger areas and but the overall progression through the game is not, okay, you get whatever, a double jump, and now you can get somewhere else. You get movement upgrades in Metroid 2, but you cannot finish the game just with finding all the movement upgrades. You have to hit certain thresholds of like defeated Metroids in order to lower an acid level and then explore further. And I kind of like that idea, but not like exactly. So the system now works a bit differently. I'm not going to go into any details, but it's basically like, okay, you have to go into like a larger area, defeat bosses, find like a thing that a boss holds, go back out, and basically turn this thing that you found into a progression item that will then open up further areas, and you will gradually descend down like a larger structure and explore that, and stuff happens there and all that kind of stuff. So so that was all that. So to go through the list, what I did, and it's probably not complete, honestly. Like I had trouble when I sat down and like wrote everything down, I had trouble figuring out, okay, what did I do? Because it was like actually quite a lot. And it was like in parts fairly weird for me to actually have like had the ability to get that much done. And like part of it, like I'm pretty sure like I started taking ADHD medication in mid-October, and I think like at around November, early November, it really started to like work. And I just was able to just get things done in a way that was very difficult sometimes for me in the past. So that was really weird. So I threw away most of the structure I built over the last 3 months. I changed how hyper mode works. I'll go into a bit of a detail in a moment. Change how charge attacks work. These are two like aspects I'm really, really proud of, that I finally managed to like get both of these things into a state where I'm really happy with. Added a character stat and upgrade system, because if I said, okay, I want something where there's like a map that you explore and things, the problem really is that when you say you want to explore something, there's something that you have to find as well. And like thinking about, okay, what stuff can you find there? And for me, one idea was, okay, like one part is finding entrances to prisons where friends of yours are like imprisoned to gain new convictions, which are like power-up items that you can equip. And the other part would be like things that help you upgrade your character stats. So there's now like a progression system. I actually had to build out a whole damage formula that's right now a bit wonky. Also talk about that in a moment. Added a whole character building sequence that's like more of a narratively framed thing that like happens between the end of the tutorial and the start of the quote-unquote real like part of the game. It's not quite there yet how I want to frame it, but it is there. It's basically you're getting like asked a bunch of questions, and depending on like you have two answers for each question, and depending on which answer you choose, you will get a different passive effect on your character. Stuff like you deal more damage when you're like when your HP is under 25%, or the meter that you use to like activate hyper mode with gradually charges up over time. Stuff like that. It's not like very substantial, and the overall experience won't completely change around, but it's a way for me to like give people a way to kind of have like their own type of character. Right now the bonuses that you get are hidden away. You only know what you get after you pick your answer. Again, this is all stuff that might change. For me, the important part is the system exists now. And all I have to do now is then over time figure out how to actually like have the final version of it and what I want this to be. But I'm glad that the system is there, because it's much easier to adjust an existing system like as opposed to having to build it over and over again. So that's a good thing. I did write a bunch of dialogue. Also fiddled around with the text engine again. I'm slowly getting a hang of how it works, so I can actually I started customizing it for like what I want it to be. So that's kind of great, but it's still, again, a work in progress. I added a fast travel system. I added a save load system that also like both are actually working, which was kind of great, and it wasn't all that fiddly. The save load system was a bit fiddly, but I'm fairly proud of what I did. There are now rebindable controls, there's a main menu and all that kind of stuff. I actually built the whole first area and connected it to the tutorial sequence, and felt pretty good about everything, really. I did not manage to completely get everything that's there. I didn't get everything done before November 16th, but most of the stuff, like character set, upgrade build system, and like most of the stuff I got done until like November 18th or something like that, where there was basically a very raw version of an extended demo version that I submitted to the IGF. Like, I did submit the game to the IGF, but like the download link at first was pointing towards like the EGX demo that is also currently on Steam. It is updated now. If you support me on Patreon, you can get access to that as well. Patreon.com/Mokograd, by the way. It's $5 a month. There's also I also did a fairly long video playthrough of the demo and talked about like a lot of the stuff in more detail, and like things I realized as I was finishing this demo, like what I want the rest of the game to feel like and what I want to emphasize and all that kind of stuff. So there, I go a bit into more detail there as well. So yeah, that's all that I did. Let's talk a little bit about other parts. So why did I, like, why the new structure and all that kind of stuff? Again, the problem really was for me to realize if I keep making new systems, and also like the problem with the overworld exploration, to put it this way, is I also had to figure out a way to tell people, okay, you have to roughly go into that direction. And like thinking about, okay, how do I build that part of the game out? And it's a whole other thing, because sure, you can add an overworld, but without any even like rough like pointers as to like where you're supposed to go. It's just like a thing where you walk around in and have no idea what the point is. And honestly, in the end, it wasn't really like, I felt it's a nice idea. Like the idea was that you're like, you and a group of friends are like slowly traveling throughout this very very throughout this world that is in an incredibly awful state, in order to free the future from prison. And when I rethought the structure, I thought, okay, what if instead of like making the game about the travel and that last, like more like emphasizing the travel aspect of the game and getting to that point, what if instead the game starts once you reach like basically the part where the future is imprisoned? It's not exactly that, but like basically, quote unquote, what if you just arrive at the final dungeon? It's like, again, it's not like in terms of size and all that kind of stuff, but just in terms of the idea. What if I just cut out all the okay, you have to find something where the truck that you're driving around now can do this and whatever. Like this isn't like, it didn't really like, again, the idea was cool, and I had like, again, thoughts of how to frame it that I found interesting, but also no. Like I wasn't very happy with that. So, and this is what I then started doing, is these are like most of the concept stages or like larger stages that I built, and that I then started to rearrange and like started to figure out, okay, how can I put these together to make distinct areas that you can explore. And then I basically realized when I put all of this together that I have what's here is basically like around 75, like between like 60 and 75% of like an entire, like in terms of like overall area, obviously, and not everything else, of like what the game might be at the end. What currently exists is like this part here. This is what I built so far. But the good thing about having these like templates for these stages and all this other stuff is I can build out this much of the game fairly quickly. Like building out this part up here, like just building out the areas and placing down enemies and all that kind of stuff took me maybe 3 days, because also I have a bunch of tile sets ready, I have like a bunch of enemies ready. It's not enough to like fill the whole game with everything, but it enables me now to really quickly build out the rest instead of thinking, okay, how do I build the rest? And that's like a very good part, because also like something I realized as I was building this whole player stats system, like building out the damage formula and like figuring out, okay, where and how do enemies get stronger? How do I make sure that like there isn't like a thing, because right now, for example, in the demo, it's very easy to get incredibly overpowered if you just put the stuff you find into like your attack stat, and all that kind of stuff, and like figuring out how to like balance all of that out. I tried to do it in that one area, and then I realized this doesn't make any sense for me to try and do this for this one area, because I have no idea how the rest looks like. So what I need to do now, and this is like goes for like a lot of other things as well, what I need to do now is like make sure that like the rest of the game, like the rest of like the overall like map area and stuff like that exists, and fairly soon, so that I can then go in and make sure that like the power curve works out nicely, that the progression feels interesting, that like there are narrative beats that are happening between them, and there's like these are like timed and spaced out in a nice way and all that kind of stuff. But I can't do all of this without like with just like one area. It's like it's not going to work. So I have to like build out the rest and then go back into that. And that's again like a thing where I'm really happy about, because otherwise with like a whole different like travel system and all that kind of stuff, this stuff would have been like getting to that point where like everything exists would have taken much longer. And now with this idea, I at least can build stuff, and I can always this is like something I have always trouble with, I can always go back and change things. Like it's not that these maps that I placed here, that like, okay, this is how everything looks like. Once I like, when I realized that like, for example, like a sequence of platforms or whatever is just awful, or that like a level or like an area is just awful, I can just replace it, because it's like, it's not that hard to do. But in order to figure these things out, like everything has to exist. So that's kind of like where I'm at in that regard. And again, I'm really happy with that. I think I managed to find basically all the interesting elements I had, like with all these previous ideas of mine of how I wanted the progression and all that kind of stuff to work, and kind of distilled them down into a state that actually works and that I can work with like fairly easily, because it's not that difficult, but it still like does the things that I wanted to do mostly. Again, most of the stuff doesn't exist yet, but the way everything is set up now, I'm fairly confident that I can get the rest to work as well. So that was great. Sorry for the cough. So, and here's the other part that I kind of want to talk about, and you can see here, like, you see there are damage numbers now, because again, when you have a damage formula and like suddenly you have, and damage formula was important because again, if you have something where, for example, your damage increases because you can get upgrades, having a linear damage formula where you start with, okay, you do 1 damage and then you do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and whatever, that like it gets very hard to balance it out, because either you or the enemy like can get like very strong very quickly. Like for example, if you had like a linear damage curve and also say, okay, the further down you go, the higher the defense of the enemy is, to balance out the more damage that you do, or like the more HP the enemies have. If you miss out on health upgrade, on damage upgrades in that regard, could also mean that, and because it's like the upgrades are very much dependent on you exploring the spaces, and if you don't find these things, you can get very quickly into a situation where like even defeating simple enemies would take forever, and that's not very interesting. So there has to be like a way to balance it out better, and for that you have to like build out an actual like a formula, a curve where you like where like things don't like increase linearly, but like more like gradually, or like flatten out at a certain point, so that you know you can basically, even if you never upgrade yourself, you will always, I mean that's always the case, you will always deal guaranteed damage and all that kind of stuff. And also like I want to like in the end build it out in such a way that you can actually, that it should be possible to beat the whole game without ever picking up any upgrades. And like the charge attacks and the hyper mode changes, like these special attacks that you see here, play a special role because they actually decrease the defense that the enemy has for like a short moment. So you can launch an attack and then actually do more damage with your regular attacks after using a special attack. Or you do one special attack and then launch a different special attack to deal more damage with that. Stuff like that. So, and what I built here, and like for like these hyper mode special attacks and stuff like that. So hyper mode is something that for some reason all of my games so far have, is you fill up a meter via doing something, and once that meter is at a certain threshold, you can you can activate hyper mode, which is just a thing that powers you up in some ways. I was a bit struggling with Witcher 7, like with how I wanted to do it. The demo on Steam has like the basic idea of like what's there now as well. In that there like you have upgrades that you can equip, like things that you can equip that I call convictions, but it's very similar in type to the what are they called in Hollow Knight? The charm system in Hollow Knight, where you basically find things that enhance certain abilities or change certain things around. And the idea for Virtua 7 for these convictions, which are all tied to like people that you free from prison and that reflect basically their like belief system to a degree, or like their personality in a strange way. What these do is they have both a passive and an active state, and the passive state is just like something that you do in the demo version. For example, you only get one conviction, which is the conviction of Dr. J, which when you have it equipped and it's passive, reduces the damage that you receive from spikes. And if you activate hyper mode, for the duration of hyper mode, you actually don't get any, like when the conviction is F, you actually don't get any damage like from spikes. So you're invincible for that duration. And like it's used in the tutorial to basically, in a weird way, gate access like to like the rest of it, or make it much easier. Also increase the duration of hyper mode and stuff like that. So that was there. And what I did is basically I changed it around, made it more similar, and this is like part of the Zelda 2 thing still. And maybe I talked about it last month, I have no idea, but basically I have it in such a way that the the active convictions, all that kind of stuff, and like how you activate it is very similar to like the magic system in Zelda 2, where in Zelda 2 you could equip certain spells and then press a button, and usually these spells gave you like a temporary like effect. For example, you received less damage, dealt more damage, jumped higher, turned into fairy, stuff like that. And the active like convictions in hyper mode are similar in that regard. You press a button, then a set amount of like zeal gets subtracted from your meter, and for a certain duration you get all of the active effects of all the convictions that you have equipped, which was great. The problem still was, especially like when you don't have a lot of them and don't have a lot of slots, it's still kind of weird because you don't really have a lot of reasons to activate hyper mode, because there are, for example, what if you have the thing that makes you invincible to spikes, but there are no spikes around, so why would you ever activate it? Which meant that there was no real reason to ever really spend the resources that you gathered, and it was like there was like a real hyperinflation in the amount, and still is kind of in the game, in the amount of zeal that you get. So I had to like figure out, and I wanted to figure out a way, okay, how can I make this more interesting? How can I add more stuff to it? And then I had this idea, and like this was like after I changed the charge attacks that I will mention in a moment, is what if there are like 4 different types of special attacks that you activate when you activate hyper mode, and the kind of special attack, and you see all of them here, the kind of special attack depends on which conviction you have equipped in your first slot. So for example, the thing with Dr. J is like all of these small like projectiles like flying out and hitting the enemy. A different conviction gives you a large laser beam. They all have different properties to a degree, and there will also be like later on a mechanic where basically equipping convictions of like similar types. For example, if you have a thing that gives you the laser beam special attack, having further convictions equipped that also have like the laser beam special attack status thing attached to it will make that attack stronger. So there's like more of a decision making process behind, okay, what do I want to have equipped? How do I want to have it equipped? When do I switch these things out? How do I basically build out my character and all that kind of stuff? So like I did a lot of like work there, like mostly like preparatory work, because right now there are like the game in the end will have around 12 convictions. Right now it's 4, so there's still like more stuff that I need to add to this. But I'm fairly happy with that because now you kind of have more of a reason, for example, at the start of a boss fight, to activate hyper mode because you like launch a very, very strong attack at your enemy, which again will also decrease the defense of that enemy, which means you can, for a short period of time later on, deal more damage to it, blah, 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 blah. So there's like more of a more active decision-making process behind it, and not just oh well, I guess I activate it now, I have no other, like, why not, and all that kind of stuff. So again, there's more of an incentive to interact with the system, which is very, very good because you should build systems that people want to interact with, right? Like, at least I think there's more of an incentive. Who knows? Playtesting is still a thing that I should do at some point, I guess. So that's like one thing that I did. And then I just like put up the flowchart that I made, like, I think last week at some point, because I always wanted to do it. Can I zoom into this? No, I can't. Oopsie. So anyway, so I also added like charge attacks, and you can kind of see it like up here. This thing like is like a combo meter. Added another thing to the game in order to make this work, but I think it's a good thing in general. And it works similar to the meter system in God, what it is, like, I think the official name is Trials of Mana, like Seiken Densetsu 3, or like Secret of Mana 2, however you want to call it, that game. Also, I got this idea while I was playing that game again. But basically it's something where if you hit enemies, this combo meter charges up, and once it's full, and they're like different different strength of it and length, like you can basically have like 3 different stages of like how long your combo can get, and obviously the longer it is, the more damage you do, blah 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 blah. So that was like something, because like there was always a charge attack in some way, like for a long time in Virtuous Heaven, but it was attached to like, sometimes it cost zeal, sometimes it didn't, and also like it always required you to stand still for a moment, for like a second. The same with hyper mode. By the way, I changed both of these things. Now you have to press you press a button and it just happens, which, come to think of it, was a bit of a strange decision of mine, to like make a game where all you do is move around and be very quick, or can be very quick, and then add 2 special attacks or 2 special states where you have to stand around for at least a second, which, no, that was not a good idea. So I changed these things. So, and if you like, if this meter is full and you press then the special attack button, you can launch different special attacks depending on the state where you launch the special attack. So normally when you're like on the ground and then press the charge attack, like basically spend your combo, you just do like a short range energy blast. But then there are like other things. There's like a weird downward like blast attack that you can do when you're jumping, when you like launch a special attack out of like one of your like special dash moves. You like launch a stronger attack out of them. So like there are now like several states to this as well. But I personally find them fairly cool. And again, it adds a layer of not really complexity in terms of forcing the player to actually use these systems to a degree. I mean, the charge attacks also, like, for example, break certain walls in these levels. And the only way to actually get to certain areas. So there's like a part of that in that regard. But for example, I won't ever do a thing where like, okay, you have to do your like horizontal like special dash move in order to like damage this one enemy or whatever. It's much more broad in the sense, if you hit an enemy with one of these attacks, no matter like what attack it is, you will get these additional effects, aside from, okay, it deals like quite a lot of damage in itself, also again reduce defense for a while and all that kind of stuff. So there's that part as well. There's more like an added layer of expressiveness to it. And what I find really funny is at the beginning of this year, so I think I mentioned it a few times, but the whole movement system and like a lot of like again, the character controller of what is in Virtuous Heaven is something that I've built for like since late 2017, like winter of 2017. It is something I always have gone back to, and again, never really managed to get a game out of this. This is again still by far the best attempt at making a game out of this, and I'm pretty sure at this point that I actually can get it done. And I had a lot of, it was incredibly complex. And when I sat down earlier, at the beginning of this year, I said, okay, let's tear it down to the most basic stuff. To the stuff that you actually want, which is a dash attack, like the double jump that also is like a jump attack, and then like a slide that you can do or whatever. And over the last few months, I added stuff back in. So again, like this upwards dash wasn't there like 4 months ago, and mostly this one actually, and like some other like tangential stuff. And again, this whole thing here wasn't there, and now it's there, and I kind of made it more complex, but like in a more like it makes more sense, like the complexity and where it is and how you and especially how you initialize these moves makes much more sense than what I made before. So that's great. And it's more like a chain of complexity and not a weird mess. So that's that's really, really cool, and I was really, really happy about all of this. And the game's in a good state. Really, it's. I also did like some smaller stuff that I have like that isn't like right now isn't worth mentioning, but a lot of like the last week I spent a lot like some more time just preparing things like in order to have potentially more like complexity in the game, like in terms of like enemy behavior and stuff like that. Because I think like the game needs it, and also I'm like now at a level, like technically at a level, like in terms of like what I can code in like in a fairly quick manner, without it all falling apart. I'm now like at a level of like ability where I can do these things without much problem. So that's like why like what I added. There isn't really a lot to show for in that regard, but it's more like something where I can, again, once the rest exists, I can then add more complexity where I feel that the game needs it, because like there's stuff that supports this complexity now, and that's great. So that's all of that. A very short 40 minutes. So what will I do in December? Well, I will do nothing. Well, mostly nothing. Because that was like my plan for quite a while. It was to kind of take a break in December, not work on Virtuous Heaven, and instead experiment around a little bit with different ideas for like other game concepts that I would like to do in the future at some point. But that's very hard for me to actually, like, I have problems experimenting with game ideas because I always, like, it always drifts towards, okay, I have to make this, and blah, blah, blah. So I really want to take some time in December. Like, I have like 2 ideas that I want to pursue. I'll like probably have to choose one of them, and maybe make something small of this, but also like only just having maybe some like systems in place for like this like these other ideas that I can then work on like at some point in the future would be great, because yeah, and it's also like part of me trying to figure out what kind of games I also would like to make, because I right now I'm fairly certain that Virtuous Heaven is the last platformer that I'm going to make, because there won't I don't see a point in making another one after this one, because I like the game, what this game does, like still, and we'll have to see how how everything looks at the end, but the overall concept of what I want this game to be is basically what I personally would like to have in a platformer. And once this is done and I'm happy with it, why would I make another one of those? So that's like a thing. So, and I have to like then figure out, okay, what kind of games can I also make? How do these work? What do I have to pay attention for there? And all that kind of stuff. So that's like a thing. Like, I will probably do some smaller stuff some like administrative stuff, like make some plans for January. I also like am planning on I'm planning on relaunching my email newsletter, like because Twitter is awful and I don't want to use it anymore. And also like just like being able to like build more stuff and more things where I can talk about my games and all that kind of stuff. These are like plans that I want to do. The game will be in the Steam Next Fest, which is in February, and like for January, like the plan is in general to take what I have right now and polish it up to a degree where I can say, okay, this is like a very good demonstration of what the rest of the game is going to be. Like again, for like the Steam Next Fest, there will maybe be like a new demo version towards the end of the year that is that is kind of like what I have right now. But I will probably not announce that and just do a quiet update because again, it's not right now. It's not completely in a state where I would be very happy with a lot of people looking at it because again, it's still a bit wonky and I would like to get these things a bit more into a polished state. But I will probably update it. It's like also because there are reasons, other reasons why I might have to do that. And that's like something that I might be doing, but mostly I won't be doing work on Witcher's Heaven. And like once January comes around, get the Steam Next Fest demo up and running, plan out what I want to do for the Steam Next Fest, and then make the rest of the game as like quickly as possible. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to exist at first, and then you can make it perfect. And as always, don't fall into despair in face of the sheer impossibility of everything, which sure is still sometimes a struggle. But since I got an ADHD medication, it got much better, which is cool. It's great to go out grocery shopping and don't leave the grocery store thinking that you would really, really like to throw a bunch of people that were standing in your way into a trash can and feel like you aged like 5 years just standing in line. That's awesome. Anyway, so that's all that. As always, you can follow @Mokograd on Twitter. I will still be posting like updates of like stuff that I did and that happened, like larger things. So you can follow that. You can obviously subscribe to like the YouTube channel, which is, I think there's now an ad as well, also @Mokograd, I think. Please wishlist the game. I'm very close to 1,000 wishlists for this game. It would be cool if I could get past the 1,000 mark before the end of the year. That would be just a nice thing to have, just for myself. But yeah, that's like most of it, like what I have to say here. Oh yeah, also you can, again, support me on Patreon. At some point I'll add these links as well. Haven't done much there lately because of frustration and, but I'm trying to find like a regular rhythm with it. And again, right now, like supporting me there for $5 gives you access to like the most like recent demo. So if you want to play the thing that I submitted to the IGF, you can do that. And again, like some more like detailed stuff about things that I'm planning and other things that I haven't gotten around to doing, but I hope that I will do at some point. Who knows how this all is going to go. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. It certainly has been time. We'll see you next month, I guess, and next year. I hope you have nice holidays if you celebrate them. And yeah, have like a nice quiet, dark time at the beginning of winter. It's so great that it's always dark outside. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm sick. Anyway, I'm going to probably take a nap now. Bye everyone. See you around.